Oliver Daniels yanked off his grease-stained hoodie as the bell over the shop door jingled, and a gust of cold wind swept in with a flurry of late October leaves. His 5-year-old son, Ryder, sat cross-legged on the floor in the corner, coloring a crumpled superhero book while chewing the end of a red crayon. "Hey, bud," Oliver called over, setting the broken laptop on the counter. "You okay?" Ryder nodded without looking up. "I gave Batman a mustache." Oliver grinned, but only for a second. The laptop was a mess: coffee damage, cracked screen, keys missing. He sighed and rubbed his temples. Rent was due in 5 days. The fridge at home was a wasteland of condiments and expired milk, and the only customer he'd had all afternoon was a woman who'd barely looked him in the eye. He glanced back at the counter. She'd been striking in a quiet sort of way: messy bun, oversized sunglasses, and a voice that didn't quite match the worn jeans and hoodie. Velvet smooth, precise. She hadn't said much, just, "It crashed. I need it for work. Please do what you can." Then she was gone. He hadn't even caught her name. And yet her laptop was sitting there like a puzzle he couldn't afford to fail. "All right," he muttered, cracking his knuckles. "Let's see what secrets you're hiding." 2 blocks away, Kennedy Owens stepped out of the coffee shop and slid into the backseat of a sleek black SUV. The driver glanced at her through the rearview mirror. "Everything goes smoothly, Miss Owens." She pulled off her sunglasses and exhaled. "I dropped it off at a repair shop on 5th. The place looked functional. I didn't want anyone from the office knowing I fried the system." "Understood." Kennedy leaned her head back against the leather seat. The laptop held sensitive files: contracts, projections, confidential merger details. If anyone found out she, CEO of Owens Global, had spilled an entire double espresso over it while arguing with her board, it would be front-page news by morning. Which is why she didn't use the usual tech team. She needed someone discreet. And fast. 3 days later, Kennedy returned to the shop alone, hoodie zipped to her chin, sunglasses bigger than her face. The bell chimed. Ryder looked up from a plastic dinosaur war he was staging on the welcome mat and waved. "Hi." Oliver appeared from the back, wiping his hands on a rag. His eyes lit up with recognition. "Hey, you're here for the laptop," she nodded. "Is it?" He reached beneath the counter and pulled it out. "Fixed, mostly. The motherboard was halfway fried from the coffee, but I replaced it with a salvaged one that fits. I had to reinstall everything, but your files were intact. You're lucky." Relief softened her features. "You saved my life," he chuckled. "Wouldn't go that far, but I'm glad it helped." She hesitated, then reached into her bag. "How much?" Oliver scratched the back of his neck. "It was a lot of work. A few parts weren't cheap, I'd say. 200, she blinked. "That's it. I mean, I know laptops. I'm not trying to scam people." Kennedy slowly handed him 4 bills. "Here's 400 for your time and your honesty." He stared at the money like it might vanish. She watched him tuck it carefully into a metal cash box, then her gaze drifted to Ryder, now holding a dinosaur in each hand, making explosion noises. "Your son." "Yeah, Ryder, he's 5 going on 20, Kennedy smiled. "He's adorable." "Thanks." Oliver's voice softened. "He's my whole world." Kennedy looked at the boy, then back at Oliver. "Would you ever consider fixing something else?" Oliver raised an eyebrow. "Depends what's broken, my office printer, and possibly my faith in technology," he laughed. "I can handle the printer." "The faith part might take longer." She held out her hand. "I'm Kennedy." He shook it. "Oliver." And he felt it then, something electric in the simple touch of her fingers. Something that made his chest tighten in a way he hadn't felt since before Ryder was born, before everything fell apart. The next day, Oliver stood in the lobby of a towering glass building downtown, holding a toolbox and trying not to sweat through his t-shirt. The receptionist smiled. "Miss Owens is expecting you." He rode the elevator to the top floor, walked into a penthouse suite office with floor-to-ceiling windows, and froze. Kennedy stood behind a desk the size of his kitchen table, dressed in a tailored navy jumpsuit, hair sleek, heels sharp. His jaw nearly hit the floor. She gave a small smile. "Kennedy Owens, CEO, surprise," he blinked. "You're a billionaire. That's what Forbes says." He let out a low whistle. "You let me repair your laptop in a garage full of busted game consoles and half-eaten goldfish crackers." I needed someone who wouldn't recognize me, and I liked your son's dinosaur army. He ran a hand through his hair. I feel like I should curtsy or something. Please don't. It'd be weird. They both laughed and something settled between them, familiarity, curiosity. A spark just waiting for oxygen. She led him to the printer and he got to work. She talked while he fiddled with wires about the company, her ridiculous schedule, how she missed having normal conversations. "You're the first person in a long time who didn't try to impress me," she said quietly. Oliver looked up. "I was trying not to embarrass myself." "You didn't." Not even a little. Over the next week, she found more things for him to fix. A squeaky desk chair. A broken espresso machine. A drawer that jammed. Each time he showed up with Ryder in tow, Kennedy would set him up with coloring books or a bowl of candy while she and Oliver talked. One afternoon, after Oliver fixed her office speaker, they sat by the window watching the city lights flicker on. "You ever dream about doing something else?" she asked. He fiddled with a bolt in his hand. "Used to. I was going to be an engineer. Life had other plans." She looked at him. "You're brilliant at what you do," he shrugged. "Doesn't pay much. I could change that." He turned to her. "Kennedy, just listen. I have a position, head technician for our internal systems. Salary, benefits, flexible hours. You'd still get time with Ryder, and I trust you." He was stunned. "That's a lot. You deserve more than barely scraping by." He looked at her, really looked. Her eyes held something new now, not just kindness, something deeper, something scared. "Why are you being so nice to me?" he asked. She didn't answer for a moment. Then, "Because I think about you more than I should, and that scares the hell out of me." His heart pounded. "I'm just a guy with a toolbox and a 5-year-old, he whispered. She stepped closer. "And I'm a woman who's spent her whole life surrounded by power and money. And never found anything that felt real until I met you." He swallowed hard. "We're from 2 different worlds." "Maybe," she said. "But I'd like to see what happens if we try to build one together." And before he could overthink it, she leaned in and kissed him soft, certain, unforgettable. Oliver forgot about the skyline, the job, the billion-dollar company. All he could feel was her. And the way, somehow, in the middle of a broken printer and a pile of unpaid bills, he'd found the start of something that might just change everything. Oliver stared at the cracked ceiling of his apartment long after Ryder had drifted off to sleep. The boy curled beside him in their shared bed, one arm wrapped around a stuffed bear with a missing ear. The silence of the room should have been comforting, but his mind whirred like an overclocked processor. He hadn't seen Kennedy in 4 days, not since she kissed him in her office like she'd meant it, like it wasn't just some impulsive mistake. He'd expected a call, a text, something. Instead, nothing. He'd fixed what was broken. Maybe that was all she needed from him. Still, the memory of her mouth on his, the way her breath hitched right before she kissed him, it had replayed in his head every night like a film reel set on loop. The knock at the door came just after midnight. He blinked, sat up straight, listened. Another knock, this time louder, hurried. He slipped out of bed, careful not to wake Ryder, and padded barefoot to the door. He opened it slowly, half expecting to see a neighbor complaining about hallway noise or a package delivery gone wrong. Instead, Kennedy stood there, her navy coat soaked from the rain, eyes wide, cheeks flushed. "I shouldn't be here," she said, breathless. He stepped aside without a word and let her in. She crossed into the apartment, dripping onto the warped linoleum floor, and turned slowly to face him. "I've been trying to talk myself out of this for days. You succeeding?" "I was. Until I realized I wasn't breathing right without you." He closed the door behind her. "It's late. I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about your son's dinosaur war and the way you handed me the laptop like it was a fragile secret. I kept remembering how safe I felt with you." He crossed his arms. "So what is this then? Some late-night epiphany?" "No," she said. "It's a mistake, but it's the only one I want to make." She took a step toward him, then another. Rain clung to her lashes. Her coat weighed heavy on her shoulders, but she looked radiant, like she'd walked out of a life filled with glass towers and board meetings and into something real. "I don't want to be a job offer you regret or a kiss you try to forget," she said. "I want to be more than that, if you'll let me." He didn't answer right away. He walked past her to the small kitchen, opened a drawer, and pulled out a towel. "You'll catch pneumonia standing there like that." She took it from him with a soft smile. "Thanks." He leaned against the counter, watching her dry her hair. You disappear for days, no word. I thought maybe I imagined it that moment in your office. You didn't. I just panicked. I'm not used to letting people in, and you didn't ask for anything from me. That scared me more than if you had. I didn't want this, he said. But I do. She met his eyes. So do I. A soft rustle from the bedroom pulled their attention. Ryder's sleepy voice echoed faintly, mumbling about dragons or cereal. Oliver couldn't quite make it out. You should stay, he said, voice low. Until the rain stops, she nodded. I didn't bring anything. There's a clean shirt in the laundry basket, might be a superhero on it. She laughed quietly. I've worn worse to meetings. They didn't kiss again that night, they didn't need to. She curled onto the couch with a borrowed blanket, and he sat in the armchair across from her, both of them quiet, listening to the rain drum against the windows. By sunrise, she was still there barefoot, sipping coffee from a chipped mug, looking like she'd always belonged. Kennedy didn't vanish again. She came by 3 times the following week, once with a smoothie for Ryder, once with a box of tools Oliver hadn't been able to afford, and once just to sit with him while he soldered a circuit board in silence. She didn't hover, didn't interrupt. She just watched, her long fingers curled around a mug of tea, her eyes soft. One evening, she leaned against the doorway of the shop while Oliver replaced a cracked tablet screen. I've been thinking about your designs, she said. The ones you mentioned, your own prototypes. He didn't look up. They're rough. Maybe, but I remember what you said, that you used to want to build things, not just fix them. He set the tool down. That was a long time ago. Still, she said, I'd like to help you try again. He turned toward her. Kennedy, you're a billionaire. You don't need to back a guy who builds things out of scrap parts. I don't do things because I need to. I do them because I believe in them. And you believe in me. She stepped forward, close enough that he could smell the faint lavender on her skin. Yes, he hesitated. What's the catch? There isn't one. That's hard to believe. I know, he studied her, then nodded slowly. All right. She grinned and pulled a folded piece of paper from her coat pocket. Then you'll want to see this. He unfolded it to find a sketch, his sketch. The one he'd made on the back of a receipt weeks ago and left on the shop counter without thinking. It was a modular motherboard design, compact, efficient, unlike anything on the market. You kept this. I had it mocked up by one of our engineers. It works. His throat tightened. You serious? I want to fund the first prototype. No strings, no contracts, just a chance. He stared at the paper, then at her. Why me? Because you see value in things other people throw away. That's rare. Something in his chest cracked open at her words, something he hadn't realized he'd locked up years ago. Okay, he whispered. The weeks that followed blurred in a haze of late nights, solder burns, and shared takeout containers. Kennedy spent more time at the shop than at her glass tower office, often in jeans and sneakers now. Her hair pulled back, her hands covered in grease as she handed Oliver a wrench or passed him components. Ryder adored her instantly. She taught him card tricks, helped him build a cardboard spaceship, and once showed up with a puppy-sized robot that could fetch crayons. You spoil him, Oliver said one afternoon as they watched Ryder chase the robot around the shop. He deserves it, Kennedy said. So do you. He turned to her. You ever think this is crazy, you and me, all the time? And it doesn't scare you, terrifies me, she said. But I'm used to walking into boardrooms with sharks. Loving you is the first thing that feels like a risk worth taking. He reached for her hand. Then let's take it. The prototype was finished in 6 weeks. It was sleek, functional, and entirely his. Kennedy arranged a private demonstration in a hotel suite downtown, where Oliver presented it to a panel of investors she trusted. He wore a blazer she'd bought him, and Kennedy stood quietly in the back watching him shine. The panel applauded. 2 investors requested follow-ups. Afterward, on the rooftop of the building, Oliver leaned against the railing, breath visible in the cold night air. You know, he said, I used to think my life had a ceiling, like I'd already hit the limit. And now, he looked at her. Now I think I was just waiting to meet someone who'd blow the roof off. She laughed, eyes shining, and reached into her coat pocket. Then you'll probably think this is insane, he frowned. What? She pulled out a folded document, a deed with his name on it. It's for a space uptown, bigger workshop, clean wiring, rents covered for a year. He stared at it, stunned. Kennedy, I'm not buying you, I'm investing in you. In us. He set the paper down and cupped her face in his hands. You already did. Then he kissed her fierce, full, final. This was no longer about a broken laptop or a surprise identity. It was about two people who had no business finding each other, but did anyway. The buzz of conversation in the packed ballroom was muffled by the thick velvet drapes and the soft percussion of a live string quartet. Oliver tugged at the collar of his perfectly tailored navy tuxedo, feeling like the suit might strangle him. He shifted his weight in the Italian leather shoes. Kennedy had insisted on shoes that probably cost more than his entire rent. Across the room, Kennedy stood near a group of sharply dressed executives, her posture relaxed but commanding. A sapphire pendant rested above the neckline of her deep burgundy gown, catching the light each time she moved. She laughed at something one of the men said, but her eyes kept drifting back to Oliver. He caught her glance and tilted his head slightly, giving her a look that said, "Rescue me." She excused herself from the circle smoothly, weaving through the crowd of financiers and CEOs until she reached him. "I can't talk to any more hedge fund managers," he muttered. "They all sound like they're trying to sell me a yacht I'd have to build myself." Kennedy grinned. "You handled that last one like a pro." He asked me if I planned to scale my vision across vertical markets. I said I'd get back to him after I figured out what that meant. She took his arm, guiding him toward the balcony. "Come on." "We're skipping the next toast." The night air was cool and quiet on the rooftop terrace, a relief after the suffocating luxury inside. The city stretched out beneath them, glittering and alive. Oliver leaned against the railing and loosened his tie. "How do you do this every week?" he asked. "I don't, not anymore." She folded her arms, eyes on the skyline. "Before you, I spent more time talking about projections than people. I knew every market shift, but I couldn't remember the last time I laughed at something that wasn't in a boardroom." He looked at her. "And now I know your son likes his toast cut into triangles. I know you hum when you're trying to solve a problem, and I know that I don't want to go back to before." Oliver didn't speak for a moment. Then, quietly, "I looked up the other companies that pitched modular systems like mine. They've got entire teams, funding from universities, international patents. And none of them built it in a garage with one soldering iron and a 5-year-old drawing spaceships on the walls," she said. "You don't need to match them. You're about to surpass them." He turned to her fully. "Why me, Kennedy? You could have anyone, any genius with a resume a mile long, but you're here with me. Because when I'm with you, I'm not Kennedy Owens, billionaire, I'm just Kennedy, and you look at me like I'm not made of glass." She reached into her clutch and pulled out a small velvet box. His breath caught. "Is that what I think it is?" She opened it to reveal a sleek, brushed metal key fob. "It's for the new space I bought downtown," she said. "It's yours, fully equipped, your name's on the lease. You decide what to build, who to hire, how to run it." He stepped back. "That's too much." She held his gaze. "No, what's too much is watching you limit yourself because you're afraid of what it means to want more." He exhaled slowly. "I've never been afraid of failing. I've been afraid of being left behind again." "I'm not going anywhere," she said. "Unless you tell me to." "I won't," he said quietly, "but this us it's fast. So is lightning." He looked at the key again, then at her. "You believe in me more than I do." She reached for his hand. "That's what love is." The door behind them creaked open and a voice called out, "Miss Owens, they're ready for the presentation." Kennedy squeezed Oliver's hand. "Come with me." He hesitated, then followed her inside. The ballroom had cleared to make way for a stage. A massive screen displayed Owens Global's logo, now sitting beside a new one Daniels Tech Solutions. A hush fell over the crowd as Kennedy took the mic. "Tonight, I'd like to introduce you to someone who reminded me that innovation doesn't come from money or power. It comes from grit, heart, and refusing to give up when the world tells you to fold." She turned to Oliver. "Come up here." He froze. Dozens of eyes turned toward him. He looked at Kennedy, then at Ryder, sitting on the lap of Kennedy's assistant near the front, wearing a tiny bow tie and beaming. Oliver walked to the stage, heart pounding. Kennedy stepped aside. "Tell them your story." He stood in front of the mic, the room silent. "I used to think I missed my shot," he began. "That I was just going to fix other people's broken things until I couldn't anymore. but someone walked into my shop one day and saw past the dust and the cracked screens. She saw what I could be, he looked at Kennedy. And she didn't just hand me a second chance, she stood beside me while I built it. The room erupted in applause. Later, after the crowd had dissipated and Ryder had fallen asleep in Kennedy's arms, Oliver sat beside her in the back of the car. "You're incredible," he said. "So are you," she whispered, brushing Ryder's curls back gently. He leaned in and kissed her temple. "You changed my life." She looked at him. "No, we changed each other's." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded envelope. "What's this?" "Plans," he said. "For a second prototype, one that's even better. I want to build it with you." She smiled, eyes shining. "I'd love that." The car sped through the city, the future waiting just beyond the glass. The morning of the tech launch arrived with a tension so thick Oliver could feel it pressing against his ribs. He stood in the bathroom mirror of the new workshop, his workshop, adjusting the cuffs of a crisp button-down shirt, while Ryder sat on the counter beside the sink, swinging his legs and eating dry cereal from a plastic container. "Do I look like someone who knows what he's doing?" Oliver asked. Ryder nodded solemnly. "You look like a dad who's about to win." Oliver grinned and tapped Ryder's nose. That's all I needed to hear. Kennedy had arrived earlier, dressed in a dove gray wrap coat and low heels, her hair pulled back in a sleek twist that made her look a bit more like the woman the world knew, but softer, more grounded, like the Kennedy who now spent Sunday mornings helping Ryder build laser traps out of cardboard tubes and duct tape. She waited in the front of the building while Oliver finished getting ready, pacing the floor of the showroom that now gleamed with polished steel tables, mounted screens, and a row of glossy prototypes lined up like soldiers preparing for battle. When he joined her, Ryder slipping his hand into Kennedy's without hesitation, she turned and exhaled. "Everything's ready," she said. "They're waiting for you," he nodded, heart thudding like a hammer in his chest. "I'm not used to they waiting for anything I do." "Well," she said, "get used to it." They stepped outside into the cool spring air. A sleek black SUV pulled up to the curb, and Kennedy opened the back door for Ryder before sliding in herself. Oliver followed, tucking the presentation tablet beneath his arm like it might vanish if he didn't hold it tight. The event was being hosted in a private industrial space Kennedy's team had retrofitted overnight. Floor-to-ceiling banners displayed the new branding. Daniels Tech Solutions, crisp and sharp in dark red lettering. A small crowd had already gathered: investors, tech journalists, a few skeptical engineers who'd come only because Kennedy Owens rarely backed anything without shaking up an entire industry. Oliver stepped out of the SUV and blinked at the sight of it all. Lights, cameras. A registration booth with his name printed at the top. A security guard wearing a badge that said Event Director greeted him with a nod and an earpiece. "Mr. Daniels, we're ready when you are." He turned to Kennedy. "I don't know if I'm more nervous about speaking or tripping over this carpet." She leaned in close. "You've already done the hard part. You built something no one else could. This is just people finally noticing." Still, his hands were clammy as he stepped onto the stage. He began the demo. His voice shook at first, but as he walked through the process explaining the modular systems, the adaptive energy flow, the repairable architecture, he found his rhythm. He didn't try to sound smarter than he was. He didn't throw around buzzwords. He just spoke plainly, clearly, like he would if he were explaining it to Ryder. By the end, the room was quiet in that way that meant people were paying attention, really listening. Then came the questions. One investor raised his hand. "What's your plan for scaling production?" "I'm working with a local manufacturing group," Oliver replied. "They specialize in small batch tech builds. I'd rather start focused and grow the right way than explode and burn out." Another, "You've got something here." "But why should we bet on a guy without a formal engineering degree when there are 5 firms overseas trying to build something similar?" Kennedy stood from her seat in the front row. "Because none of those firms built a prototype that's already outperforming their best models. And because this man doesn't just understand the technology, he understands the people it's meant to serve." Oliver blinked. She hadn't planned to speak. She hadn't even brought notes. She stepped onto the stage beside him, one hand lightly brushing his back. I've sat in on hundreds of pitches, she continued, her voice steady. I've heard every buzzword, every inflated promise, but Oliver built this because he had no other option. He built it in a garage with a child to feed and nothing to fall back on, and that desperation created brilliance. This isn't a product. It's a revolution in accessibility, sustainability, and repairability, and if you're smart, you'll get in early. A beat of silence, then applause. Oliver looked at her, stunned. You didn't have to do that. She looked back at him. Yes, I did. By the time the event ended, 4 investors had scheduled private meetings, 2 tech publications requested interviews, and the head of a major tech distributor asked to tour the workshop personally within the week. Back in the SUV, Ryder was fast asleep, sprawled across the backseat with his mouth open and his arm flung over Kennedy's lap. Oliver sat beside them, the adrenaline finally wearing off. Are we really doing this? Kennedy nodded, brushing Ryder's hair back absently. We're doing this. He watched her for a long moment, then said, You know, the first time you walked into my shop, I thought you were just another client who'd never remember my name. She smiled softly. And I thought you were just a guy who could fix my hard drive. He reached over and took her hand. Turns out you fixed a lot more than that. 2 weeks later, Oliver stood in the kitchen of their new apartment, still modest, still homey, but with more space, more light, and a second bedroom for Ryder. He was chopping peppers for a stir-fry while Kennedy sat at the table, helping Ryder assemble a science project involving baking soda and plastic volcanoes. The workshop was officially operational. Orders were coming in faster than they could fill them. He'd hired 2 employees from his old neighborhood, both skilled, both hungry for a chance. Kennedy had stepped back from the day-to-day, letting him lead while quietly handling the logistics he didn't yet have the experience to navigate. The doorbell rang. He wiped his hands and opened it to find a courier holding a small, flat box. Delivery for Mr. Daniels. He signed for it and opened the package. Inside was a framed certificate. He stared at it for a long moment. Kennedy glanced over. What's that? He turned it toward her. Patent approval. For the modular core. She stood and crossed the room, looking at the document like it was a painting. You did it. We did it. She looked up at him, eyes bright. What now? He thought about it. Now we build something that lasts. That night, they sat on the couch, Ryder asleep in his room, the city lights flickering through the window. Oliver pulled out a small velvet box, not a tech component, not a prototype, something simpler. He handed it to her, her breath caught. Oliver. I don't have a private jet. I don't own an island, but I have a ring, and a heart that hasn't stopped racing since the day you walked into my life. She opened the box slowly. Inside was a delicate gold band, simple and elegant. He took her hand. Marry me, Kennedy. She didn't speak. Just nodded, eyes full. He slipped the ring onto her finger, and in that tiny apartment, with the hum of the city outside and the soft breath of a sleeping child down the hall, they built the beginning of forever. Together. The spring sun poured through the tall windows of the new Daniels Tech workshop, casting golden light across the freshly sealed concrete floors. Oliver adjusted the height of a custom workbench while a soft jazz playlist played from the mounted speakers Ryder had picked out from a thrift store, insisting it made the place feel like a movie. Kennedy stood near the far wall, watching as one of their newest hires, a young woman named Mariella, tested the calibration of a new modular system. Her heels clicked softly across the floor as she walked toward Oliver, holding a tablet with the latest order updates. 3 new contracts confirmed this morning, she said, setting the tablet on the bench. 1 from a university in Toronto, 2 from a startup in Seoul. They want product samples within 6 weeks. He leaned over the screen. We'll need to streamline assembly. If we standardize the casing dimensions and lock in the voltage caps, we can double our output without hiring more staff. She nodded, then glanced around. Have you noticed how quiet it's been lately? Too quiet? No, just peaceful. He looked at her. You're not used to peaceful, are you? I'm not used to anything staying good for this long, she said. It always felt like the other shoe was hovering, just waiting to drop. He wiped his hands on a towel. Maybe the other shoe already dropped, and maybe we climbed out of it with steel-toed boots. She laughed and reached for his collar, fixing the fold. You're due at City Hall in an hour, he groaned. Right, I still don't understand why they want me to speak. Because you built something people believe in, because you turned possibility into something tangible. And because I may have told them you were better at speeches than you actually are, he narrowed his eyes. You didn't. I did. He pressed a kiss to her temple. You're lucky I love you, I know. Mariella waved from the other side of the room. Kennedy, your assistant's on the line. Something about the catering for this weekend, Kennedy turned. Tell her no oysters. Ryder said they look like alien slugs. Once she was gone, Oliver leaned against the bench and exhaled. The speech didn't scare him. What scared him was the idea of standing in front of a room full of people and admitting that the life he'd wanted was finally within reach. Ryder came bounding in from the side office, holding a cardboard box under one arm and dragging a backpack behind him. Dad, I found the old camera. The one from when we made the volcano. Oliver took the box. You want to bring it to the ceremony? Yeah, I want to take pictures of everything, especially the cake. There's going to be cake. Oliver looked at Kennedy. Not your kind of cake, she said. It's a metaphorical cake. Unless you win something, then I'll buy you a real one. He tilted his head. You're full of surprises lately. I'm trying out unpredictability. You're still the most organized person I've ever met. She leaned in. I've got a spreadsheet for that. Later that day, Oliver adjusted the mic on the podium inside the grand rotunda of City Hall. He looked out at the crowd, community leaders, small business owners, tech enthusiasts, and his own team seated in the front row. Ryder sat between Kennedy and Mariella, clutching the camera like it was made of gold. He cleared his throat. 2 years ago, I was fixing broken phones in a garage that didn't have heat, he began. I had no plan, no investors, and no roadmap. Just a soldering iron, a kid who believed I could fix anything, and a woman who walked into my life like she already knew where we were going. He paused, glancing at Kennedy. She smiled and gave a subtle nod. I'm not a man who was handed opportunities. I built them. With scraped knuckles and late nights. And now, I get to stand here as someone who didn't just build a product but a future. One where the next kid growing up in a small apartment knows they don't have to be born into power to create something extraordinary. Applause filled the room, but Oliver barely heard it. All he could hear was the pounding of his own heart as he stepped down from the stage. Kennedy met him halfway up the aisle. You didn't trip. I almost did. You made people cry. I almost did that too. She kissed him quickly, savoring the moment. You're going to need a tuxedo. For what? For the Tech Innovation Awards in June. You've been nominated. He blinked. That's insane. You'll need to get used to that. I'm still adjusting to functioning plumbing and decent coffee. Back at the workshop that evening, the team gathered for a celebration. Ryder taped up a hand-drawn banner that read Daniel's Tech Rules in crooked letters, and Kennedy brought out sparkling cider and champagne flutes. Oliver stood beside her, watching everyone laugh and toast and celebrate. The world he'd built no longer felt like a dream. It felt like home. After the team left and Ryder had fallen asleep on the couch with an empty cupcake wrapper on his chest, Kennedy stepped out onto the rooftop of the workshop. Oliver followed, wrapping his arms around her from behind. The city glowed below them, soft and golden. She leaned into him. I've been thinking about something. Oh no, don't worry, no mergers, no acquisitions. That's a relief. She turned in his arms. I want to get married here, he blinked. On the roof, why not? It's where we started. He thought about it for a moment. You want a wedding with wires and solder stations in the background. I want a wedding with history in the background. Our history. He kissed her. Then that's what we'll have. The rooftop wedding took place 6 weeks later. Ryder served as ring bearer and DJ, spinning a playlist that included both classical music and the theme song from his favorite video game. Mariella officiated with a printed script and a voice that only cracked twice. Kennedy wore an ivory jumpsuit with a silk sash, her hair twisted into a braid that shimmered in the sun. Oliver wore a gray suit with sleeves he kept rolling up whenever he got nervous. They said their vows while standing on the same rooftop where they'd shared their first kiss. No cameras. No press. Just laughter, love, and a breeze that carried the scent of the city and the promise of forever. When they kissed, Ryder cheered so loud the team below stopped working to clap. That night, after their guests had gone and Ryder had fallen asleep in his new room at home, Oliver poured 2 glasses of wine and joined Kennedy on the balcony. "I was thinking," he said, handing her a glass. "What do you think about adding a second floor to the workshop?" She took a sip. "For what?" "Research lab, maybe a mentorship program for kids like I was, the ones who think they're stuck." She looked at him over the rim of her glass. "You're serious?" "I think it's time we start lifting other people up. The way you lifted me." She reached for his hand. "Then let's do it." They stood in silence, their fingers laced, the city humming around them. Their love hadn't come from candlelight dinners or fairy tales. It had come from broken things, and the belief that anything could be repaired, even hearts, especially hearts. And as they held each other beneath the stars, their story wasn't just one of finding love, it was building it. One circuit, one promise, one impossible dream at a time.